Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks radio network. Welcome to another episode of Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Really appreciate you joining me on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast for free. Or if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, be sure to subscribe to my channel while you're watching. You can also write a review for the podcast, give the podcast a 5-star rating, and let folks know to check out the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to give me a follow there for everything that my content brings you, whether it be on my YouTube channel or on social media. Mavericks dominate the Portland Trail Blazers on Wednesday night, getting the 126-97 win at home over the Portland Trail Blazers as the Mavericks begin their season-long 7-game homestand with a win to move to 20-15 on the season, now 9-7 at the AAC. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving were the two guys that were on a special night for the two of them as they combined for 70 points in the game, combining to score 52 in the first half alone, outscoring the Portland Trail Blazers 52-47, where the Mavericks led by 31 at halftime. And it was really over after the second quarter as the Mavericks dropped 43 points in that decisive second quarter. In fact, at one point, hitting 6 consecutive shots and overall 10 of 11 shots as Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving put things away early on in this game against the Portland Trail Blazers. And more importantly, they were able to set a tone offensively in that game, especially in the second quarter, where they got out to a 14-5 run and really never looked back from there. The Mavericks had already led by 10 at the end of 35-25, but they were able to turn it up as far as the defense was concerned throughout the course of the game, in a game where the Mavericks defense was able to force 22 turnovers, scoring 27 points off said 22 turnovers, outscoring the Portland Trail Blazers 28-14 in fast break points in what was a foul fest in the first quarter, particularly where there were 34 fouls called. The Mavericks shot 17 free throws, converting 13 of those, and it was really a ref show in the first quarter. Things started to settle down from there, but the offense for the Mavericks turned up in that second quarter, as I mentioned, dropping 43 points. The 78 points that they had at halftime was a season high as they go on to win wire to wire for the third time this season, now 13-3 versus sub 500 teams. But I'm sure the Mavericks are ready to send Portland out of Dallas as quickly as they can. Not only did they have the game with them on Wednesday night, they also take on the Portland Trail Blazers on Friday night as well as they complete their season series with them. Mavericks are now 3-0 so far against Portland, who has been absolutely dreadful. No DeAndre Ayton in this game for Portland, as they were not able to have the services of their big man. Speaking of big man getting injured, I mentioned the fact that the Mavericks are sick of playing the Blazers so far this year. Here's why. In the second half, the Mavericks lost not only Dereck Lively II to another sprained left ankle, but they also in the fourth quarter lost Grant Williams with a sprained right ankle. Now, Jason Kidd said that both Grant Williams and Dereck Lively II have both mild ankle sprains, which is initially good news if you're a Mavericks fan. But think about this when you're a Mavs fan and having watched the Mavs play the Portland Trail Blazers so far this year. In the first game, Kyrie Irving gets a fluke heel contusion after Dwight Powell falls on him in the first game. In the second game in Portland, just 8 days after the first time they played each other, Dereck Lively sprains his left ankle and has to miss 4 games. Now in the third game against Portland, Dereck Lively II sprains his left ankle again after Scoot Henderson falls on him. And then in the fourth quarter, Grant Williams has his right ankle rolled up on by another Blazers player. So I'm sure if you're looking at this team facing the Blazers, you're tired of watching the Blazers play the Mavericks, because it seems like every time these two teams get together, somebody from the Mavericks is getting injured. Again, Jason Kidd saying after the game, though, that the ankle sprains are mild for both Dereck Lively II and Grant Williams. We'll see what their availability looks like going into Friday's game against Portland. This is already without the services of Dante Exum, who's dealing with a heel contusion of his own. And we know that Luka Doncic continues to manage his own quad injury going forward for the rest of the season as well. So while yes, the win was good, one of the more complete wins of the season on both offense and defense for this team against a bad Portland Trailblazers team. And again, handling business against bad teams is something that the Mavericks have been really good at this year. There is concern now going forward about the depth of this team, which we have seen so far be tested throughout the course of the season with the amount of injuries that they've dealt with. Kyrie Irving having already missed 12 games. Dereck Lively II missing those 4 games with the aforementioned sprained left ankle. Now Dante Exum missing out on another game as far as the Wednesday game was concerned against Portland. He will most likely not be available on Friday as well. Maxi Kleber continues to remain out with his right small toe dislocation. So the concern being, how do the Mavericks find a way, especially in their front court, if Dereck Lively is not going to be playing potentially on Friday? Richaun Holmes happened to miss the game as well due to personal reasons. So for a team that's 20-15 right now, still outside of the top 6 as the Pelicans won their game on Wednesday night as well, how do they find a way to weather the storm yet again, even with the quote-unquote mild ankle sprains of both Dereck Lively II and Grant Williams? And that's a question that will be answered here over the next several days. But for the game against Portland, you saw a lot of good offense. The offensive music that was made together, the beautiful offensive music that was made together by Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving was simply spectacular. Mavericks taking advantage of a Portland Trailblazers defense that really fell asleep at the wheel quite a bit. Several backdoor cuts that the Mavericks were able to take advantage of. Some really nice passing for this team as far as sharing the basketball was concerned. You could tell that the energy was there from the get-go as the Mavericks opened the game on a 9-0 run and really set the tone on both ends of the floor. Within the first couple of minutes, they had already forced 3 turnovers on the Portland Trailblazers, something the Blazers have been really good at so far this year, a team that likes to get a lot of steals, nearly 9 steals per game, gets a lot of deflections, 519 deflections coming into the game against the Mavericks. The Mavericks were able to turn the tables a little bit on them and force the action and pressure on them on the offensive end and really put the defense of the Blazers on their heels. So you saw a lot of really good ball movement, a lot of player movement, and more importantly, terrific shot making from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Luka Doncic hitting a catch and shoot 3 off of a Dereck Lively screen in the left corner. You saw Kyrie Irving being able to pull up in transition, knocking down 3s. This is something that we knew coming into the season was not going to be a problem for the Mavericks, which was scoring the basketball when Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are healthy and on the floor together. And you saw that again tonight, a team that has been a top 10 pace team all season long, and you saw them get back to that with their ability to get up and down in transition. Josh Green was in the starting lineup on Wednesday night for the Mavericks, of course, with Dante Exum being out. And you saw what he was able to do. He was 3 of 5 from the field, was a plus 22 in the game, had a couple of steals as well. Everyone's numbers were extremely positive in this game based off of the blowout that they had over the Portland Trailblazers, which is funny because the Mavericks only had 4 guys in double figures. Tim Hardaway and Jaden Hardy were the other 2. Tim Hardaway knocking down 5 out of 10 shots. He had 14 points. Jaden Hardy scored all 11 of his points in the fourth quarter. But it was Doncic and Irving who did the heavy lifting. But again, this win comes at a cost based off of what happened tonight. And if you're the Mavericks, you're hoping that you can continue to build on what they've done so far this year. Jaden Hardy, when I talked to him prior to the game on Wednesday, said, look, this team has been through a lot, but at the same time, there's chemistry that we're still building on. We've learned a lot about each other throughout the course of the season so far with a lot of moving parts and new guys on this team. And while, yes, that is true, the expectations still remain that this team, based on its roster and more importantly, the two guys at the top, this team needs to be a top 6 team in the West with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving spearheading the offense for this team. And you saw on Wednesday why people like myself feel like this team can finish as a top 6 team in the West, because they're going to boat race people offensively when they're knocking down shots like they were on Wednesday, where they shot an even 50% from the field, shooting over 43% from three, going 13 of 30 from downtown. That is the formula for this team. Knocking down shots at a high rate, sharing the basketballs. They had 25 assists on the 42 field goals that they made. But most importantly, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving being the ones that lead and share the scoring load. And that was one of the reasons why the game on Monday was so disappointing against the Utah Jazz, because Luka has been carrying and shouldering all of the minutes when it comes to the heavy workload on the offensive end, while also playing some decent defense on the other end. And you were hoping with the return of Kyrie Irving, which you saw on Wednesday, he being able to share the load with Luka Doncic, and he was able to do so with 29 points in the game. You go back to that second quarter alone, based on what they did, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, Luka with 17, Kyrie with 14. They were a combined plus 28, going a combined 12 of 16 from the field for the 31 points that they scored. Devastatingly efficient for the two of them. And when they're working off of one another, being able to take turns in terms of running the offense and being able to get up and down in transition to put pressure on teams, that is when the Mavericks are at their best. And the supporting cast for this team playing off of those two, being able to work and move and share the basketball, that is when this team is really, really good. One of my favorite plays from the game is you see Kyrie Irving off of a backdoor cut. You see Dereck Lively be able to make the pass from around the free throw line, and he hits it with a picture-perfect, accurate pass as Kyrie Irving is able to get the bucket in terms of the hoop and the harm. So look, Mavericks starting a very important 7-game homestand with 2 games against the Portland Trail Blazers. And when you start to look at their schedule going forward here, they've got to find a way to start stacking wins to be able to not only climb themselves back into the top 6 picture, but most importantly, give confidence that they can start to beat some other teams that are pretty good. As I mentioned, they're 13-3 against teams so far this season with a sub 500 record. Most good teams beat bad teams, and that's all that you can expect really good teams to do. So far, the Mavericks have done that. And if they continue to beat up on the bad teams, they're going to have a pretty good record. But when you start looking at their schedule going forward, they beat Portland on Wednesday. Now they play Portland again on Friday. Then they welcome in the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, the New York Knicks, and then the Pelicans for 2 games on the 13th and the 15th. Both of those games, especially at the end of their homestand, are going to be significant for the standings in the Western Conference. These games will not be easy. You've got one of the best defensive teams in the league in the Minnesota Timberwolves. John Morant is now back for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm really looking forward to seeing Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks on January the 11th come to the American Airlines Center, where you know the atmosphere is going to be electric inside the building, and Jalen Brunson will be looking to put on a show in front of his former team. And with OG Anunoby on that team as well, that matchup between him and Luka Doncic, with OG Anunoby being their best defensive player, how he matches up with Luka will be really fun to watch. And then, of course, it's always electric when Zion Williamson is on the floor when he's healthy, and you have back-to-back games against the Pelicans on the 13th and the 15th. Then you go on the road to take on the Lakers, who are struggling right now, who have lost 8 of their last 10. And then you take on the Golden State Warriors before you face Boston and Phoenix on the 22nd and 24th. So we're going to learn a lot about this team over the next few weeks and how the depth will respond based on the injuries that they've suffered, the schedule that they have, especially playing some really good teams with Minnesota, New York, the Pelicans, the Los Angeles Lakers, I should say, the Boston Celtics, the Phoenix Suns, who have been surging and playing a little bit better as of late themselves. Will this team respond based on the capabilities that they have at the top with Luka and Kyrie? Only time will tell based on what we've seen so far. This is why you've got to find a way to ensure you don't have a letdown on Friday against Portland. The Mavericks will not practice on Thursday, so they have a chance to rest their legs before they get back on the floor against Portland on Friday. But then you welcome in Minnesota, who are going to try and grind you out defensively and be able to put pressure on you with guys like Anthony Edwards and others. And then John Morant comes to town. And that's a divisional game where you know there's going to be a lot of fun between those two teams. So again, all of this to say is it is extremely important to get off to the start that you did on Wednesday, defeating the Portland Trailblazers, and then needing to do it again on Friday against Portland. And if you're Jason Kidd, you're hoping and you're praying that Dereck Lively, especially, finds his way to get back on the floor relatively soon and not have to miss extended time during this homestand. You saw what Lively brought in this game prior to leaving the game. My man had 4 blocks and was providing rim deterrence and shot protection at the rim. And the amount of dependence on the 19-year-old is huge for this team defensively. While he's going to run into a rookie wall, and Jason Kidd talked about that prior to the game, he's going to run into that rookie wall. He's going to have to learn how to play through it because this team is going to need him. As much as I don't like to have to depend on a 19-year-old rookie to be the anchor on your defensive end, this is where they are right now. And if Rashawn Holmes is going to remain out for the next few games, dealing with what he has been dealing with, whatever that may be, the Mavericks' front line depth right now is very, very thin, especially with no Maxi Kleber back, and there's no timetable for his return based on what we know right now. So, Markieff Morris, hello. You're going to be seeing a lot of small lineups for this team over the next couple of games based off of their personnel right now if Dereck Lively is not going to be available here in the next few games. And you're going to be facing teams like Minnesota, like Memphis, bigger teams that do have size in the middle. When you obviously look at Minnesota with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid in the trio of big men that they have, they are really good ones, obviously. Memphis, while yes, they don't have Steven Adams, they do have the reigning defensive player of the year in Jaren Jackson. And oh, that's right, John Morant, who loves to attack the rim as well. So you've got teams that can do different things against you in terms of attacking the rim and then making things difficult for you on both ends of the floor. And why I wanted this team during the offseason, even with the drafting of Dereck Lively II, to find themselves acquiring a veteran backup center. Because right now they're in a position where they desperately need one. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of help coming anytime soon. So this team will have to rely on its perimeter defense. This team will have to ensure that they're getting into passing lanes and over communicating on the defensive end because they're going to be a little bit smaller and thinner without Dante Exum, with his perimeter defense and his ability to knock down shots on the other end of the floor. Grant Williams, we'll see what happens with him, even though he's really fallen out of the rotation and not getting significant minutes for this team. And now Dereck Lively II with another sprained left ankle. Things are looking very, very interesting for this team. But all is well, at least for the moment, when you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving leading your scoring charge. And if they're going to win games, at least in the interim, they're going to have to outscore teams every single night. Knocking down a barrage of three-pointers, Tim Hardaway Jr., who passed Michael Finley on the all-time Mavericks three-point list on Wednesday night. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving doing the same. They're going to have to knock down a bunch of shots to stay in games because for the Mavericks right now, the best defense is a good offense, and they have one of the best offenses in all of the association. But I like what I saw on Wednesday. The sharing of the basketball, the player movement, a lot of backdoor cuts, a lot of good reading from each of the teammates that they have to be able to move the basketball the way that they did. And that's an encouraging and positive sign that the Mavericks are willing to have that kind of player movement. because they're going to have to try and keep teams off balance, especially if teams are going to continue to try and blitz and double team Luka Doncic to try and get the ball out of his hands. And if the Mavericks can play the kind of advantage basketball that sees the Josh Greens of the world, the Tim Hardaway Juniors of the world, the Derrick Jones Juniors of the world continue to knock down shots off of the help that they will see based on what teams are going to do to Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, then this team can be able to stem the tide a little bit. And that's another reason why it was so fun to watch Kyrie Irving do what he did against the Portland Trail Blazers. Be able to take some of that scoring load off of Luka, take some of that pressure off of Luka Doncic, because all the attention that Doncic attracts, you got to pick your poison at times when it comes to Doncic and Kyrie Irving on the floor together, because both of them on the floor together are a nightmare with their shot creation, not just for themselves, but for their teammates. And when guys like Dereck Lively are also available as well, the extra threat of the pick and roll and being able to see a guy like Lively roll to the rim and finish now creates different pressure points, I should say, for defenses to have to make decisions on what they do. Because here's what the Mavericks offense is really good at: putting you in a bind to make you make different decisions on what you have to do to try and defend them. That's why Doncic is so devastating when it comes to being a three-level scorer. The same way with Kyrie Irving. They make you make decisions on how you're going to defend them. And if you're going to put extra bodies on them, guess what? That leaves Derrick Jones Jr., that leaves Tim Hardaway Jr., that leaves guys like Dante Exum when he's healthy and others open to knock down shots. And that's what the Mavericks have got to do: knock down open shots. And they did so on Wednesday. So a good start for the Mavericks. Again, a 7-game homestand where they've got to stack as many wins as possible, but more importantly, be able to settle in a little bit after the difficult schedule that they've seen so far this year, with the amount of home, road, home back-to-backs, and the way that they started off their season. Remember, their first 8 games of the season, they alternated home and road games. Just a really goofy schedule, if you ask me, based on the way that they played their first 30 or so games so far this year. But now, through 35 games, they're 20-15. And that's another interesting part about all of this. The Mavericks at 20-15 and now play 35 games. Guess what, boys and girls? We are now near the halfway point of the season in the NBA. While, yes, the quote-unquote halfway point of the season isn't until the week of All-Star break, which is around February 14th and 15th, the Mavericks are about to be halfway through their season here during this homestand. So we'll get a true evaluation of where this team is once this homestand is complete and what we feel like this team is going forward. But right now, based on what we know, when this team is at their healthiest, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can't be stopped offensively. When this team is knocking down shots from downtown, they can't be stopped offensively. When they are turning defense into offense, especially in the fast break and playing with the kind of pace that puts pressure on defenses, this is a very tough team to beat. But this is also a team that's got 13 of their 20 wins against teams with a record below 500. So they've played a little bit of a schedule that's allowed them to pad it based on some of the teams that they've played. That won't be the case during the second half of the year. And as I laid out a little bit earlier, the schedule tells you that they've got to find a way to beat some of these good teams, because otherwise, if they don't, they will find themselves potentially in that play-in situation, and that is not where you want to be by the time you get to the playoffs. So again, good start to the homestand for the Mavericks. Good win, complete win, third wire-to-wire win for this team this season, leading from the outset, not taking the foot off the gas throughout the course of the game, which is something that I enjoyed watching throughout the course of this basketball game. Is you put the pedal to the metal, you didn't let up, you didn't let a bad team get any kind of momentum in this game, and you ensured that you were not going to allow them to get back into the game at any point. And that's exactly what they did. Can they use that same resolve, that same mentality on Friday to be able to put the Blazers in the dirt the way that they did, especially in that second quarter where they just lit them up for the 43 points that they did and made sure that there was no coming back in the game on Wednesday. All of that remains to be seen as the rest of the week goes on. As I mentioned, Mavericks will not practice on Thursday. They'll have the day off to get some rest, and hopefully for Dereck Lively II and for Grant Williams, that treatment will be good enough to hopefully get them back on the floor sooner than later. Luka Doncic needs as much treatment as he can get dealing with his quad injury. Same for Dante Exum and his heel contusion. But again, good win. You move on and you get ready to play the Portland Trail Blazers on Friday as you look for your 21st win of the season, and you look to get your 10th home win of the year, where we know the Mavericks have been terrific on the road. We've got to start putting some of that together now at home in front of those rowdy MFFLs, and they did so on Wednesday with the win, 126-97, a complete beatdown of the Portland Trail Blazers on Wednesday night. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. You can also watch this video on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Be sure to subscribe to the channel as well with the podcast. Give the podcast a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there, and you can download it on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcast for free. Daily content on this Mavs team I will provide to you as I'm able to do so. You can also check out my own personal podcast, the Gray Area Podcast, wherever you get your podcast for free. You can also ensure that you are following Grant Afseth, who's covering this team, following this team all over the country throughout the course of the season by following him on Twitter at Grant Afseth, and you can locate and watch his YouTube channel at Grant Afseth as well. Again, appreciate you joining me on this episode of Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, your home of Dallas Mavericks basketball. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak. Appreciate you joining me on Inside the Mavs. I'll talk to you later. Peace.